All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Trevor Power, the gallery curator here at MCC. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this artist talk featuring MCC's very own Matt Irie. I'd like to quickly thank the MCC Art and Design Department and Joe Sullivan, the Dean of Arts and Humanities, for their support in organizing this event. I'd also like to thank Justin Schmitz for setting up our Zoom recording this afternoon, and Paul for all of his help setting up the AV tech for this event. And I think most everybody knows Matt. He doesn't really need an introduction, but I'll read a short bio before he gets started with this talk today. Matt Irie, an MFA graduate from Northwestern University in 2002, has showcased his work widely in solo, two-person, and public exhibitions. Highlights include a permanent commission for the Chicago Public Libraries in 2005, participation in the Luleá Art Biennial in Sweden in 2009, and a site-specific installation with the Public Art Fund at MetroTech in Brooklyn in 2010. Recent exhibitions include Arresting Gestures at Evanston Art Center, 2021, and Some of All at Cleaner Gallery and Projects in Chicago in 2023. We have 4 of his pieces in the permanent collection here at MCC, 3 of which he donated just last year, which we're really excited to get in the collection as well. So please join me in welcoming Matt Irie.
Thank you, Trevor, and thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, class. I appreciate it. I usually like to start talks whenever I'm asked to give a talk at a college, sort of where I was when I was in school, when I was about your age. So I'm kind of doing that. I also got rid of a lot of things from my sort of running PowerPoint, but then added some things back. Hopefully I didn't put too much in there. But I thought I would try to sort of think about the work that's in the show upstairs in Gallery 1 and 2 and sort of put together sort of an evolutionary how I got there and see where those connections come from stylistically, formally, conceptually, and what have you. So this first slide is when I was in undergrad, probably around a sophomore or something in undergrad. I was making a lot of figurative work. Back then, we had to do slides. We didn't have digital cameras to take pictures of the work. So I have there's a whole series of figurative work that is, I don't have any images of. Maybe a Polaroid here or there. But this one was pretty big, 4x6. Ever since I was in high school, I've been participating in bands, rock bands, punk rock bands, different kinds of things like that. I'm still in a stupid band. We just played 2 shows last weekend. And I think that where I used to try to keep these things sort of separate and apart from each other, they've, undoubtedly have come together, have always been together. I just tried to make them not, but they really have always had. So there's, I think, always kind of this punk rock attitude that might be in there a little bit. At least I think so. I also look pretty dumb when I'm up there. So after I did the figurative work, the person that I was working with in undergrad, Gordon Dorn, made a lot of geometric paintings, and there was another artist, Paul Urshan, that I shared a studio with, who was making some really cool geometric paintings, and I was kind of into it, so I tried and try to give it an effort there, and I always kind of start off a little bit loose, and then they get tighter as they go. And all these are 4 foot by 4 foot, or just off maybe an inch. And I guess I wasn't thinking too much about color until I started to. And at the time, Gap was selling a lot of khakis, and it was like the khaki season or something. And so I started trying to make these khaki colors and gray colors of Gap pants. And I guess I was interested in these paintings, trying to create a shallow sense of space and kind of make these squares and rectangles hover above the composition. They're also heavily textural. And I think this ties into some of all the work that I do. Where I want there to be a very kind of tactile visual experience, right, like very close, but I also want them to kind of hold together from far away. So I feel responsible for both of those. I want them to be a satisfying experience on both levels. So these I was using like really kind of 4 inch or 5 inch brushes to kind of comb the paint across. I think some of the last ones played around with blurring to further develop that sense of space. And these were all called like rhythms in yellow and gray, like kind of had something to do with music. At the same time, in undergrad, I was interested in kind of graphic images and printmaking, kind of a layering, and I think this adds to like what I'm doing now too. That there's always been a layering effect, like almost like how printmakers do one layer at a time. This one's called My Friends. I think this is playtime. I like that these kids are like blindfolded and on these. Anyway. Toward the end of undergrad and well into and through and after graduate school, I was making these drawings that consisted of text. I have really bad handwriting, and so I thought I would maybe try and use that and make something interesting out of my bad handwriting. And for these, I would buy a bunch of different pens. I would college rule these large sheets of paper that are 52 by 51 or 52 by 53, and then college rule, which is about a 1/4 inch apart and all the way down, and get different pens from Walgreens or something and kind of write my name a bunch of times and decide which value was what, and then sort of pick the pen up and set it down whenever I got to a different shape. Because they were so large, I'd lay down to do these, and I can only do about 20 lines at a time, otherwise my hand would cramp up or. So I did a number of these, and they're kind of these weird smoky things. But I liked that, my terrible handwriting could make something that was otherwise, kind of nice. It's a quilt pattern. This is a sculpture called Let's Get Together. In graduate school, I made a few of these brushes specifically so I could use them to make the texture for the paintings that I was making. Because I wanted that comb texture, but I wanted it all over the thing. So I would make 6-foot or 7-foot paint brushes that I could squeegee the paint across the surface with to get an even brush stroke. And I use it to make these coloring book paintings. These are also about 6-foot by 4-foot, And what I did is I would make the surface and then mask off the kitten, and then I would buy, because I had created this texture, the brushstroke texture, when I bought these really thick oil crayons, I could then use them as you could use a crayon, and it would skip over the surface the way crayons sort of do on paper. And I was really interested. Now, Glenn Ligon made some of the paintings similar to this, probably around the same time that I was making them, but I had no idea who Glenn Ligon was at the time. So in my defense, I wasn't ripping him off. And his are better. But I was really intrigued by these images that my niece had made just in the coloring book, and it made me think of, abstract expressionism. And, but I liked that it was both kind of that abstract expressionism, but also kind of, with a Jeff Koons element to it, this like kind of cute poppy thing alongside of it. So I made a couple of these, and it wasn't enough, so I also wrote a musical to go along with it that sort of abruptly erupted in my final critique at Northwestern. No one knew I was going to do this. I had somebody in the back with a keyboard hidden under coats, and I had people in the audience, in the room that were part of it that jumped up and sang like, "But is it art?" And basically the script was what I thought my faculty was going to say at my critique. So in essence, I critiqued the critique itself. And it ended in this like really uproarious sort of thing. After graduate school, I was interested in trying to make some like kind of surreal objects. So this is like a piece of paper that's been liberated out of a notebook that was spiral bound on all four sides. Or a piece of wood that sort of falls and folds under its own weight. Piece of steel that hangs on a coat rack like a towel. A cord with two male ends. Now, I've shown this a couple of times, and people had mentioned, like, because it's two male ends, like if it had something to do with gender or sexuality. And I never thought of it really that way. I always just wondered what it would be like to plug one end in and then have this live other end. Or what it would be like to plug it into the other side of the socket and see what happens. Like these minor acts of destruction, I guess. It's a sad stop sign. It's just tired of it. It's the sad stop sign out in the wild. Because this will tie in with a little bit of what I was thinking about in the gesture paintings, this is a performance piece that I wrote in collaboration with an artist named Dominic Telvacchio. In this piece, we had these two groups. If you look on your left, there's two groups of a man and a woman that are talking, and they're having the same scripted conversation at the same time, and they're moving about the gallery symmetrically. And it's called the switch. And at one point, the guy spills the drink, or maybe it's the girl spills the drink, or whatever. But somebody goes to the back to get another drink, and when they do, they cross over to the different person. But they carry on the same script because it was the same thing anyway. So that's where the switch comes in. And this was performed without anybody knowing it at an opening for like 3 times in a row. So while the opening was happening, there was this like false reality happening within it. And we were really interested in like that, what happens between when you insert the scripted into the real. It's kind of silly. And then we did a few of those pieces, and the last one we did, we had these different stations at a metro station. Stations. We had somebody who paced back and forth, somebody who had a loud conversation on a phone, every day at the same time, like at 7:30 in the morning for a whole week. But each day in each of these different stations, it was a different person. So you never knew, if you were the public, you wouldn't know maybe that a performance was happening. But we liked the idea of injecting our repetition into somebody else's repetition. Because these people are going to work at the same time every day, right? So you might hear someone screaming about a Pantone color on the phone, but you look over and could swear that you heard that thing before, but it's a different person doing it. And at the same time in your periphery, there's a different person pacing back and forth between posts. As Trevor mentioned, I was awarded a permanent installation at the Logan Square branch of the Chicago Public Libraries. This is some of those drawings. They're they're all based on Chicago, so this is a Chicago Star. The Illinois Transportation logo. The old Chicago logo of the Three Rivers. And basically Logan Square. One side is, I kind of made it more geometric, one side's a river. Most of this was from books on Chicago, and more specifically the Encyclopedia of Chicago. So I would just copy these things, like they're giant, huge sheets of notes. And I did a couple of these. These are the Poor Hammer, Sad Sickle drawings. I had a website that I created called Poor Hammer, Sad Sickle. It's no longer around, but the website was sort of based around that Hammer and Sickle broke up, and they were trying to get back together. And through this series of things, there's this free newspaper in Chicago called The Reader. It has like a misconnections thing. So I got a misconnection where Hammer was looking for Sickle. And then I wrote the Hammer Museum as Sickle, trying to get back with them. And I wrote to Sickle, which is, I think, a climbing company, as Hammer, trying to get back. I didn't get anywhere with any of this, other than in The Reader. But then I also had like this classified section in the website where I would try and sell really dumb things, like a fresh, never-before-used last Sunday's newspaper. And it was great because I would get things back like, "Are you an idiot?" And like that was what was special. And this kind of starts to get to where the paintings are going to come in. In around 2007, Dominic and I did an installation in San Antonio in this kitchen. And the installation consisted of drips, but instead of drips going down the wall, they were all going up the wall. We had done an installation like this in Chicago in this space that was just kind of this raw space. But I really liked this one better. And this just consisted of white wall with white drips. Maybe it was a slightly different shade of white. This is a clock that we showed in Sweden. The clock runs on a fraction of a second shorter than a second, and then a fraction of a second shorter than that. And then on the other side, symmetrically, a fraction of a second longer, and then a fraction of a second longer than that. Because it goes symmetrically, it kind of evens out, but it works in and out of time. And if you're looking at it, it'll look like it's broken. So it'd be like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it would choose randomly between it and kind of move in and out of time. So I guess what ties some of this stuff together is that we wanted to make things that misbehaved in a way. The last piece that we collaborated on was for the Public Art Fund in New York, and this is in MetroTech in Brooklyn, New York. This was a site-specific piece that was up for about a year. And you see all of these lamp posts around the park. We just decided one of them was going to sort of bury its head in the ground. So when Dominic and I broke up, or we stopped working together, I was still interested in what I could do with this process of making drips do things and have them still be drips. But with a painting, because it's not a wall that's like solid and locked, I wanted to keep that sort of surrealistic edge to it. It was hard at first, so I thought, well, I'll just put them in all different directions, because that would be crazy. And then people thought that maybe I was spinning the painting or something like that to make that happen. And at this point, I was still concerned that the paint drips had a head to it and a tail. And I think in the beginning of any of the series that I do, they're always kind of loose and exploratory, and then they start to get tighter and tighten up as they go. And this is the same process that I use for the paintings that are upstairs. It's called Looming Tombs. This is an early one that I actually had to take a time machine back to about 10 years ago when I was given a few commissions by a designer to make some really large multi-panel pieces based on this design. And so right now it's just a series of drips that are either vertical or horizontal. It's called Baby Stash, Hot Frost. And I'm similar to, I think, the earlier paintings that I showed from undergrad. There's this trying to like have things sort of float out there and create a bit of a space. So there's a large one called Super Croft that was 4 foot by 8 foot, sort of the largest thing I had made at that point. Some small guys. It's called Sweezy. Abracadaver. Bestseller. Juicy Sluice. And then, kind of seeing what you can do, whereas I'm kind of bunching them up here, try to bunch them up. And I think this just sort of, as I go through these, it's more of kind of a evolution of how I kind of play with the idea and push it one way or the other. Fire mud. Still kind of thinking sculptural sometimes. This is artist's first clown shoes. Gifts. Here I worked with a screen printer to make my own wrapping paper and then bought a lot of bows and gold ribbon. Sad fan. It's a 4-foot saucepan. Candlestick, the wicks coming out the edge. I get myself into these things, and I had to learn how to make candles by myself at home. Bought candle molds, all kinds of stuff. So after Dominic and I stopped working together, we were asked to do a 2-person show at the Blue Star Contemporary Art Center in San Antonio. So I began making work for that, and for some reason, at this point, I got rid of color kind of mostly altogether and started working on these black and white pieces. This one's called Stiff Wind. I did do this one, Department Compartments, but again, that went back into these gray ones. This is Slow Grower, Stealth Lover. You can sort of see, anytime I'm sort of starting these things out, they're looser, and then they get more and more tight as they go along. National Musk. Slave to the Vortex. Always like that one. And some larger ones. This one's called Decent Jams. Kind of how I used the title of this one to rip off for the title of the show. Collective Whiffs. creamy beams, and some installation shots of that show with Dominic at Blue Star. I really wanted to dwarf his painting, his drawings. But after a long period of time dealing with pretty much, not exactly achromatic, but not really any color, I decided to, at a certain point, that I wanted to bring some color back. This is Your Opinion Mattress. Regulating Bodies, Domestic Light Years, I forget. So the color came back, and then I needed to move away from the square and rectangular format. I was using, like, for the sizes of these, for the squares and rectangles, I had like records and different size books that I would use for kind of the idea of what shape would go where. This one's called Approachably Hot. It's in the show upstairs in Gallery 2. I was into this one because it had a few different kinds of space, both linear perspective and then the perspective of going in and kind of going dark, but then also just the surface with the texture. Jamish. King Hot Pants. Screen Shaver. So then a lot of these geometric pieces. This one's owned by the college, Cyberize. Bumps for Bumps. And I think we have a couple more that are in the show. Procedure, kind of putting it together, putting different ideas together. This one's called No High-End Team. I used to tell people that, like, I don't really make work for shows that are like themed shows, but apparently I do, because I was just in a show called 69 for 69, and I think I'm in a Valentine's show coming up in February, so I guess I do. This was for a show called Ducks, so I made a duck painting. This was a failed attempt. What was underneath was a whole painting, and then it didn't work, so I did this over it. I've been doing that a lot lately, making a painting and then not liking it and painting over it. I do like the way the surface is, but I really am afraid that I'm going to back myself into a corner and have to make 2 paintings for every one. This one's called Packager. I only made one of these. But apparently people like it. I've had like 3 different people now. One of them think that it's brand new and be like, "Hey, these are some cool new moves." It's like, damn it. Maybe I'll have to go back and make a big one. Also upstairs is Graphic Navels. Kind of, I think one of the last ones of these that I made. It's a kind of a small guy at test. I always like kind of end on a note where maybe I should have done way more, but I didn't, or I haven't. This was supposed to be a triptych, but I only made one of these. This is Legacy for Brutality. I stole the title from the Misfits. But I was thinking of brutalism instead of, horror business. This is a towel that stands up on its own. Kind of has a real Virgin Mary quality to it. I want to make a few of these. I'd like to see like 3 or 4 or 5 in a space. This is getting to maybe more of the more recent work. I started these paintings in like 2017, and I think I was thinking that, it was a pretty wild time. It's still kind of a crazy time, and I wanted to make these messy, crazy paintings. And these kind of go back to those kitten paintings. I've always sort of looked at and thought about how interesting and immediate children's mark making is, like naive or spontaneous improvisational mark making that is very graphic, also like very confident. They're not thinking about if it's going to be right or if it's perfect or what. And so what I wanted to do here was I tried to collect as many children's scribbles as I could. My kids, I would like steal other kids' stuff from her daycare, when no one was looking. And what I wanted to do is I would choose the colors, but I wanted to use those marks. And I would look at those marks and I would copy them as perfectly as I could onto the surface, but enlarge them. So what looks to be in these paintings really improvisational, there is painstakingly copied from a source, which was horrible after a while. It was like, it takes so long and there's so much concentration and but I would just layer these marks and change the colors as I saw fit until I could reach some sort of resolve of this really kind of like abstract expressionist kind of looking painting, which I titled the series Arresting Gestures. And I would kind of play with spatial elements, have like real pale colors in the background and more saturated colors in the front to create interesting spaces. This one's called Future Proof. Winds of Chang, sort of like this armada coming at you from the background that then got sort of obliterated by blues and pinks. And again, each of these are like from a different drawing or a different section of a drawing that I had sort of focused in or zoomed in on, cropped out. It wasn't until, this is Sand Panther, it wasn't until until like a little bit later in the series, because it went to about 2021, that I started actually taking pictures of them and loading it into a drawing program and like do 50 or 60 different kinds of marks on top of it to see what would be perfect for it and what colors I should use. Ghost of Hair. I forget. Chippier. Rafa's. Permission to Riff. Wide Open for Ow. I like how these paintings are, kind of confrontational in a way, but also I wanted them to feel like more punk rock, and I wanted these to sort of tie in to the performance work where I was interested in the real and the simulated, the fake. Killer Williams. Action teens. Teen coverage. Sometimes these paintings make heads, and I don't try to do that, but if it happens, I don't shy away from it either. Substitute t-shirt. Acosta Falls. At the end of this series, I did two paintings, Casual Riffs and Crucial Jams. This is Casual Riffs. This is Crucial Jams. And I thought of these two paintings as sort of like a key to the whole series of paintings. So you kind of saw that I was able to sort of make the same painting. So what you thought was, again, what was thought was improvised was actually very carefully considered and put together. And here are a few installation shots from the solo show at Evanston Art Center. Give you maybe a better idea of the scale. Other than the one right here, the smaller sizes are 33 by 25, and then there's 44, and then 55. They're all a variation of 8.5 by 11. And I think I started that because most of the source material I was getting was on 8.5 by 11 paper. So after the gesture series, like I said, after a while making those paintings was just like making me sick, and I couldn't do it anymore, and I just would avoid the studio. I can't do it. It's too much. It's boring. I can't, it's taking too long. It's taking up too much space. So I allowed myself to just play. I sort of took the geometric work that I was doing before, where I had sort of the spectrum of color, different values of a color, and put those together to make these bands. It took me, I don't know, how many years did it take me to figure out that I could bend the drips to my will and make them go loopy. So I was no longer tied to them being straight up and down. So I kind of combined the two and made these like kind of more noodle, ropey shapes, and sort of started playing around with them and what happens when they go over something or through something. This one's called Sexy Times. This is It Takes Two to Interrogate. And also with these pieces, I was really interested in just kind of formal things, and a lot of the things that I tell my students to do in painting, or specifically not to do in painting. And then I decided I wanted to do those things. Like kiss the edge, or let the rope just sit at the edge instead of break it. This one where on the right-hand side it looks like one band is pushing another band out. Start to have these relationships within the painting, but also break my own rules and do things that I wouldn't normally do. Stick rivers. And then, started with one color, adding another, add more, and kind of keep playing and pushing it in different directions. Start letting it go off the edge but back in, and see if we can, try and make the eye go from one level to another. And again, back to the printmaking, there's a additive process here where I'm layering. This one's in the show upstairs as well as the last one. This is Damp January. It's an installation shot from a solo show at Cleaner Gallery and Projects in Chicago called Sum of All. This is Ron, the Ruiner of Nights. Again, sometimes they make heads. Another couple install shots. So these have been a lot more fun to make because it's all about kind of an action-reaction, and a lot more to kind of what I was doing maybe in undergrad a little bit too. And this kind of takes us up to the end. This is Intimate Thunder, and this is about where I left off. So there's like a couple of paintings from the show at Cleaner, but the rest of them in Gallery 1 are all new. And there's a couple that I don't have images of yet that are pushing it a bit further with how the relationship of the sort of ropey marks are with each other. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
So we have time for some questions and answers for the artist talk. So if anybody has a question, we'll bring on the microphones so we can hear you and answer questions.
I think, thank you. The students, they're asking, does the sculpture work sort of fit with the same space as the paintings? I think that they did to begin with. The paintings grew out of that installation, and that installation was very much a part of what the sculpture work is doing, kind of playing around with a more of a surreal sort of thing. And then the painting sort of grew out of that. Now, I no longer in these paintings use the head of the drip. I don't even mention, I call them collages, acrylic latex collages on panel. But I don't specifically say they're drips or make that a part of it. So it is a little bit different now, but I don't see them as completely divorced or completely not related at all. I guess maybe because of where they come from.
Thanks, that was a really great show. I'm wondering, because I'm thinking, a lesser artist would have called all of these works untitled 2016. Can you talk a little bit about how the title of the work plays with the work? Does the title come first? Does the title come during the work? Does it strike you somewhat after? Does it inform how the work is put together? There's just this strange sort of bifurcation. I'm looking at the work and then I'm hit with this very clever, punny kind of sounding title of it. And I'm like, oh, this is a way for me to kind of focus my attention, but in a way that's completely unexpected.
Yeah.
Maybe not even connected to the work at all. So can you talk about how you feel the title is connected to the work?
Sure, thank you. That's a really good question. I think that's also part of where the music comes in. The way that I have always written or wrote lyrics and titled songs was just by writing down things that I hear, things that I may have said or misheard or missaid, other people's things, and have a running list all of the time. And I've always sort of titled songs that way. And early on, I started titling artwork that way too. So when I make these things, rarely do I have a title in mind. It's later when I've got 4 or 5 of them on the wall, and they're going to be in a show like What's Upstairs. I am forced to name them, and I pull out these long lists of names, and I look at them and sort of see oh, yeah, Your Intimate Thunder. Clearly that makes total sense. Now, it maybe I don't know why it made sense to me, but I definitely don't want the title to be so narrow that it makes somebody think it has to be a certain thing. I like to be quite open. Not so open that it could be anything at all, but open enough that you can make your own sort of interpretations. But I do like the fact that the titles are playful and not quite as serious. Similar to the music. The sound of the music and the sort of energy and heaviness of it makes it seem overly serious. So, when you name a song, something really dumb like Dudes and Don'ts, you sort of diffuse a little of that. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with the paintings as well.
Because your work is so driven by ideas, do you have a process or regimen for recording your ideas, and if that will change over time?
Well, I write down, I write notes down of all kinds of things, or little scribbles of, I had the idea of doing kind of the gestural work, but making them thicker ropes a long time ago, where I kind of wrote what would happen if I did this, and then I kind of act on it. I also have a lot of sculptural ideas that I've never actually done, but I have running lists of things that I kind of want to go back to, a big drip or a giant, a big sag in the wall. But then, I don't know, something will happen, and then I don't know, I just don't go for it. But yeah, I have lots of lots of scraps of paper, lots of lists, and when the scraps of paper start to fall apart in my back pocket, they make it to a Ziploc baggie where they're shelved somewhere, and then new note start. Hi.
So with those pieces that are like with the written text, are those like from your mind or are they like sourced from like who's located in Chicago? Like what is the text?
Yeah, so the Chicago drawings were mainly from this book called The Encyclopedia of Chicago. But then I also did a lot of research on the Haymarket riots, kind of the history of labor relations in Chicago, things that I was just sort of interested in, and that would kind of keep my attention while I was writing and changing pens for 3 to 4 hours at a time, laying down in my studio. The Poor Hammer, Sad Sickle ones were basically all sourced from Slavoj Žižek's book, Return to Lenin, or Badou's book on communism. I just kind of things that I'm interested in and kind of would go back and forth copying. So they were almost all notes. The very earliest ones I would try to write my own thing and say my own stuff, but I quickly realized I don't have much to say, and I didn't want to read what I said or what I was thinking at the time ever again.
Hi, huge fan, by the way. Question. So these collages that you made are incredible, by the way. I love all the colors you did. Can you just explain in a low-grade way how you did it? Because I don't know what acrylic latex actually is.
Yeah, so the reason I say acrylic latex is because that's the kind of paint it is. It's a house paint that you can buy in quarts or gallons. The paint that I use happens to be really cheap. It's Ace brand Royal. You can buy it in quarts, and you can use the Clark and Kensington fan deck to choose whatever color you want. And then I get the paint, and I have a bunch of eyedroppers, and I take the paint up in the eyedropper, and I drip paint down the sides of 5-gallon buckets. I've got buckets all over the studio. And those buckets have individual drips in them, which become kind of my palette. And I peel the drips up and sort of, funny enough, put them on old art magazines, ones that have a specific coating on the cover. There's a magazine called Tema Celeste, which was a great one. I guess Atomic Ranch is pretty. Anyway, and then I arrange those drips there, and those become the palette, and I can peel the drips from there and apply them one by one onto the surface of the panel. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Big fan.
Hello. I was curious what you were writing on the pieces with the bad handwriting.
Yeah, just notes. I copy the text out of various books.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Hi.
So, like, they asked more questions I was wondering, but when you do, like, an overlap on there, do you, like, have to lift up each piece individually to, like,
For these?
yeah.
No, that's a good question. For these, because I'm repeating the different colored bands, you're going to get overlap anyway, just because I'm literally overlapping them again and again. So what looks like it's a part of one on a higher surface is just below it, but how it goes off of the surface visually makes it seem like it can tie into one that's above. With these ones, it's only until the very end that I do some trickery where I cut and overlap something with just kind of a small section to bring something that was below above. With the newest two that are upstairs, I didn't do that at all, just because there were some certain shape type things that I was interested in seeing. But with these ones, there would always be like 6 or 7 areas that I choose to bring something that was overlapped to then come above and overlap the thing that was overlapping it. And I'll spend like a few hours and put little tape marks like, oh, okay, I'm going to shift this one. So like, maybe this used to go over this, and then I come in and just splice enough in to then bring this one forward. So that would happen like right at the end. I have absolutely no idea. So each band is 5 different colors next to each other, and each of those will have to go kind of like neck to neck, tail to tail, until it gets to the part where it ends. I can show this better, in person there, but really, like, I would start here, and that would go to about here. That's about as long as the drip would go. And then I would splice it, and then it goes to here, and then it splice it, and it goes to there. And then that's just the black or the dark gray. Then the next value goes next to it and does the same thing, but against it. So where I started with the neck, maybe I start with the tail. And then I do that. So that's for just one, and then that's repeated over and over again. So to know how many drips, that would be harder to figure out than in like how many hours, or how many days or weeks, months.
I also a big fan. So I'm wondering, like, how many layers are usually on each piece? Like, because like you've got it like all tangled and stuff. And I think it like looks really cool. It's just like, how many layers are usually on that?
A good question, and I don't know until it feels resolved. Some of the earlier ones have more of the negative space kind of coming out. Some of the newer ones try to almost completely obliterate it. It's really just kind of until sort of a gut feeling of resolution. There's no set layer.
Matt, is the paint tacky enough that it sticks?
It's not. It's like completely dry, but or not completely dry, because it sets up on the PVC bucket, the plastic of the paint buckets. It doesn't really completely cure. And what I do is I'll wipe some water, and then I'll put it down with a wet cloth, and I wet the drip on the top, and then push it down. And at that point, it kind of becomes glue. Now, if I put it down, I can peel it off right away after like maybe 5 seconds. But if I stand away from it and don't touch it for about even a minute, most of it is already starting to adhere and stick, because the surface that it's going onto is also the acrylic latex. And so it's a plastic, really, and the polymers with the wetness like start to bind, and I can't get it off. So it becomes like a glue in itself, which is lucky. I don't have to use some other adhesive. And I guess I didn't mention this. The whole like peeling of drips and placing them and sticking them all came from when I painted. I was a house painter, and I just one day peeled a drip off of the side of a bucket and put it upside down in the closet of the person's house I was painting, and we just sort of looked at it and was like, well, that's pretty cool. And then I was like, well, what if I did a lot of those going up the wall? Like, that'd be pretty cool. So that's kind of where it came from. And then, when Dominic and I stopped working together, I was like, well, I invented this. I'm going to go ahead and do it myself and see what I can do. And that's where the painting started to happen. In these ones, yes. In the brand new ones, I'm very much starting to consider which direction the white is, or which direction the deep red or the deep yellow is, and if they're facing each other or if they're facing away from each other, and how that makes the shape move. These are new considerations on the new paintings. With these, I just tried to keep it consistent. Like, if this left here, then I wanted it to match up there, you know, so that, but as far as a light source within these, I wasn't really too concerned. I just wanted to keep it consistent with each layer that I was doing.
Is a good situation and very nice experience for I look in the job my teacher in this time, and I thought 2 points for everybody and for you teacher. I'm sorry, I know how to really live. This is all. And other point is this is my first time and experience about the painting and looking and expression to paint. For this reason I say thank you very much for this possible good experience looking the job of my teacher or part of the production of my teacher. This is one. The other is I have slowly prudence about the quality of color you use. For I have experience now, I am in the job number 3, and I have 2 words, poor color and combination color, right? This is one point. And the question is for this reason about you use and you have experience and I look in your job. For example, in the case clear this, what is you see in all the action, the crazy first question is what is the first about the color? You have personal recommendation, for example, and it's exactly now what I need. For I use first white, green is combination. And exactly today I use the red. This is the correct order or the color for the combination. For now I have the intention the next maybe is the blue or maybe is the next the green. Now in the next lesson or the next job. This is I'm sorry for maybe say this is the crazy question. The order and the color when the people or the artists paint. This is. I don't know, maybe that's clear the question.
You're asking about the order of the colors?
Yes.
For yourself or for my painting?
No recommendation for the good results.
As far as the order of colors I think that's sort of up to each, artist for each painting. I don't think there's any sort of strict, steadfast sort of choices that have to be made in terms of a specific relationship or order. I mean, certainly there's color theory that.
And is additional in the question. Every time that people say be careful, is very difficult. For example, working the red and yellow, working the red.
Yeah, we can talk about your painting that you're working on Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So you kind of showed us, well, I was looking at this painting over there, which I think is like your geographical paintings where you like, your geometric, sorry. Your
Yeah.
geometric shapes. And then we're seeing this to be in more abstract form. So it's been interesting to see like the evolution of your work in that way. abstract and not geometric, but using the same technique for a different kind of art?
Yeah, I don't know that well, a couple things to answer that. I don't know that I'm ever gonna find my way into like making, portraits really, or like landscapes. But I look forward to the day that I sort of paint my way out of this method of working. Might want to work with oils again, or do something. I'm not exactly sure. I just keep finding different ways to kind of manipulate this thing that I kind of came up with on my own, and there's something sort of special about that I like to keep exploring to see what else I can do with this. But at the same time, maybe enough is enough, and I need to do something else. But what that is, I'm not sure yet. I'll have to, kind of, I liked the way that I sort of worked toward the end of the gesture paintings, like that I just couldn't stand it anymore. Maybe if I could get to that with these, where I just can't stand it anymore, then I could sit in the studio and have no ideas and just be filled with pure dread, and try to start throwing things at the wall and see what sticks. And maybe maybe it'll be oil painting, maybe it'll be sculpture, maybe it'll be something, but for now, it's kind of this.
All right,